alive the soil is. There's a whole world beneath your feet. There's more microorganisms in the soil than really anyone is aware of. My name is Danielle Hawkins. I'm the farm manager here at our Trout Lake Organic Farm West location. The soil supports so much life, and it's an extremely important part of our environment and our sustainability. Once you realize that, you really start to appreciate it more and start to respect it. We do testing on all of our soils and all of our compost and all of our amendments that we add to our soils. We go out and take soil samples from each of our fields and we send it off to the lab and we get soil results. And so these are analyzed by the farm managers at the different sites. And you look at these soil tests to determine what you might be lacking in nutrients. If necessary, you can amend your soil with nutrients for optimal plant growth. We don't use any synthetic pesticides or herbicidic chemicals. Anytime you're putting a synthetic on the farm, you're actually not only killing the herb on the top of the soil, but you're also killing all the microorganisms underneath, which leaves you with a sterile soil. Whereas organic is promoting life in the soil, which promotes life in the plants and biodiversity. Look at the soils now versus the soils when we first started farming, you'll find that at all of our farms, the soils are in better condition than when we started. For me, creating a good, healthy soil is creating a sustainable future. We're creating a foundation and the ability to provide healthy, quality product for future generations.
Good morning, everybody, and we're so happy and excited that you could join us. As everybody know, my name is Simon, and I'm the nutrition brand manager at Amway, and I'll be MC today. I see it's quite a chilly morning, but I'm so glad that so many of you could join us. But I just need to remind you, as a company, we're on a mission to help people live better and healthier lives. And then also with our plan, you just seen on the video that we just played on there, the whole mission about what we stand for as a company. And this starts with you, your family and friends, and the ripple effect that this will make. Once again, welcome to yet another sunshine-filled topic, which is the last of the visual series. I know you guys, some of you have joined, let's say, through all the series, you've seen that was a bit different. And now every time we try and bring you a different chunk and a different view of this whole vitamin D series that we've done, but which I believe today it still remains relevant, and also in the context of the situation that we're facing with presently. And I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you'll be inspired to continue on the nutrition and wellness journey and be able to encourage someone close to you to do the same. And if you look on the screen there, I just have a couple of house rules. There'll be an opportunity for live questions in the end. So if you look at, say, on the right of your screen, there's a little question mark, in a bubble. So a slide like that is going to come up, towards the end of the training, where everyone will be allowed, in the Q&A section of your, if you look there, where you'll be able to ask questions. So that will prompt you to say, now, listen, this is not the time. So, but throughout the training, we encourage you to, just listen through, so that, when we get to that portion where we've got questions, we'll be able to ask, questions, that will sort of be holistic. But I also then, at the same breath, should we be in a position where, not all the questions would have been answered? If you look at the bottom of your screen, it says NUTRILITE.programmedemo.com, which is an email address where all these questions that you'll have, let's say, additionally over and above what we'd have had, you can email us those questions. And it's exactly what we're trying to do, so to ensure that we're all engaging and we cover everybody with the information that is required. But now, guys, without further ado, I would like to introduce the main speaker for today, Dr. Ruth. It's quite an excellent person and a great speaker that we've got. Dr. Ruth holds a master's in public health from the University of Michigan, Department of Nutrition, and a PhD from VET in the School of Medicine. And she founded a nutrition and medical education company and consulted for a number of multinational companies in South Africa. Her special interest is helping people understand nutrition and thereby change behavior. So if you look at it, at the end of the day, it's all about trying to help people look at the way that we do things and say where we can learn, what is it that we can also change and implement. And is the whole purpose of this training, and with everything else that Amway does, it's all about, say, assisting and supporting people that we can get more information and that we can implement in how we can now redirect our life towards a healthier and better, in ourselves, and that's exactly about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to present to you Dr. Ruth.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me, and it's such an honor to be able to share with you today on vitamin D. And I really want to say, to represent NUTRILITE Vitamin D, it's a real honor because the NUTRILITE company is the oldest company in nutrition in the world, the largest plant-based supplement company in the world. And to speak representing one of their products is a little daunting, to say the least. So thank you for the honor and for the invitation. But also to just say that this talk fits into a range of talks. So we've had Dr. Zelda White from the University of Pretoria presenting alongside Simon, who you've just heard, Simon Mojano, and their talk is on the academy. So if you want to be able to get a little bit more information from the more academic side, citing the literature, etc., that's the great talk to go to. There's also Dr. Hein Badenhorst's exceptional talk on the immune system, his 5 top recommendations that he would put in place. I highly recommend that's on the YouTube channel. And so my goal today is not actually to give you an academic talk, but to help you just understand vitamin D is important, and like, how do we make it work in our lives, and what should we be doing in terms of our supplementation and diet and getting it. So let's kick off and start working on this whole concept of vitamin D and understanding it a little bit better. I'm just trying to make sure that this does move on. There we go. So it's classified as a vitamin, but it actually is a hormone. Vitamins actually are things our bodies can't make and need to get. And it's classified as a hormone, and it's a vitamin. It's one of our fat solubles, so we store it. And that's why it's really important not to overdose on it, because it gets stored up. And it works specific on 200 specific genes. Over here you can see 200 specific gene interactions, which then have expressions in 1,000 different physiological processes. Our main source of vitamin D is actually UV light. I mean, that's just crazy. Isn't it crazy to think that the light is one of our vitamin sources? But it's pretty important, and actually is the foundation to many of our plant physiology processes that provide nutrition for us. So sunlight is critical. If we take it forward in terms of how do we get sunlight, let's just understand this. And I have to tell you, this vitamin D talk has taken me back into the literature. I haven't read on it for a number of years, and it's been really fascinating to see what's happening with vitamin D. So first thing is, we need to get sunshine, and it needs to be before 11 and after 3. That's got nothing to do with vitamin D in the sunshine. That's got to do with having a skin on your body when you're older, not full of cancer and solar keratosis. So the time zone is actually the protective factor. The vitamin D will be made any time of the day, but we do want to have a skin later in life. Anything that's an SPF of 8 or more will block the synthesis of vitamin D. So you can immediately see our dilemma. We need to be out in the sun, but we want to have a skin, so we put SPF factors on to protect the sun, and therefore we block vitamin D. And that's a foundation to one of the reasons we are having so much vitamin D deficiency that we see today. Bare skin in the sun 2 to 3 times a week is the recommendation. And then if you're in hot areas, you would look at these kind of time zones to be in the sun. And bare skin means no jerseys, no t-shirts, like bare skin, arms and legs, or your back, or whatever it is, and no SPFs greater than 8 to do that. So therefore, it makes sense to be there in protective, less intense times of the sun. What also is important to understand is over here, glass doesn't let the sunlight through to make vitamin D. So that's a bit of a surprise, because we go along the highway driving, and where the sunlight shines in, we find that arm is browner. That arm has solar keratosis. This side of the face gets dark spots and possibly solar keratosis. I can't even say it. You know what I mean. And so we tend to think that, well, the sun's getting through the window, but not the right kind of UVB rays to make vitamin D in our skin. So sunlight through glass does not count. So let's look at other factors that influence not getting enough vitamin D. So right now, lockdown across the world has influenced vitamin D status, because indoor lifestyles, which we've been, whether you want to or not, been forced to do, and some people just are much more inward bound because of climate or because of physical ability to be outside and the technology world that we live in. But indoor lifestyle is one of the factors. Another factor is excess body fat. So yes, we do store vitamin D in body fat, but having excess body fat seems to have a interaction where, although you store vitamin D in it, you're not likely to necessarily be, it isn't that accessible to the body to use in excess body fat. The other issue is that people who have excess body fat tend to be, if you're self-conscious about it, you're not the person stripping down lying in the sun. So there's some complicating factors that go along with that. This is important to understand as well, is that darker skins naturally, I mean, it makes sense, darker skins have more sun protection in melanin. So darker skins make less vitamin D than the lighter skin. So you can see there's a range of skin tones, and the darker the skin tone, the less vitamin D would be made in the skin. And if we compound all of that and we have an indoor lifestyle, we have darker skin, or we have, for religious reasons, certain ways of wearing garments that cover our body very fully, that also is a risk at vitamin D intake. And then being older, and some of us can't help that, you just do get older. And what we see is that people who are over 70 will make 4 times less vitamin D than a 20-year-old. So age is a risk factor. So I think a whole number of us could tick boxes on the last 2 slides as areas that we need to think about. Are we getting enough vitamin D? Okay, so now we've got current areas of interest with vitamin D, and one of the most well-known, well-researched for years and years and years is bone and vitamin D. Excuse me 1 second. You have a sip of your coffee too. Mine is actually a lemon and ginger tea, which I absolutely love, but just keep that little croak out of my voice. So with the bone, vitamin D is critical, and I'm going to show you in a physiological slide that's on the physiology of how everything is absorbed in a few seconds. But the vitamin D is absorbed from the gut. The calcium is absorbed from the gut, and if your vitamin D levels are low, that absorption is 10 to 15% lower absorbing dietary calcium. And with adequate reserves, you'll see 30 to 40% absorption of calcium. Now, why that's important is that's how we lay down bone. And in those formative years of children and adolescence and into your early 20s, you're building your bone mass. And that is what you get And the rest of your life, you have to live with what you've put into your bone system. And that's why vitamin D and calcium are critical to actually supporting good bone health. Also, vitamin D is very important in muscle strength. So when you see muscle being weaker and bone being weaker and people getting older, falls are more easily and more frequently occurring when you have weaker muscles, and when you've got weaker bones that are osteopenic or osteoporotic, you get people who fall more frequently and fracture spontaneously or from falls that don't ever heal. So this is a critical life investment to make sure that your calcium and your vitamin D levels are correct for bone. But then we move on to areas where we're starting to see different research coming out in the last 10, 12, 15 years on vitamin D. And they show that high levels of vitamin D can be very supportive and protective to lung function and lung health. And so they saw that in people who did lung functions, that when their vitamin D levels were adequate, their protective factors and function in asthma and wheezing, their lung functions were better with better vitamin D status. So that's very important. Also, we see that there seems to be a protective factor in pulmonary inflammation levels in the lungs with adequate vitamin D status, which is of topical interest at the moment. And interestingly as well is TB is a major problem and a damaging disease in the lungs. And years ago, before antibiotics were used to treat TB, vitamin D was used. And they may not have even understood what was working, but they would take people with vitamin D and put them in solariums to have the sunshine on them, and saw an improvement in TB status and in all the things that help you live longer and feel and be healthier with TB. And we now know that then the solariums, and then they started supplementing with vitamin D, and then antibiotics came along. So for TB, which is probably one of the most frightening diseases that is prevalent in our country at the moment, vitamin D levels are very, very important. And then if we look across at immunity, now in the immune system, we see a whole bunch of T cell activity. Now T cell is our fighter cells in the immune system that go out there and they protect, and they're the soldiers, and they fight off disease. And that's very important. And in vitamin D, that is enhanced. Adequate levels of vitamin D enhance immunity through those T cell functions. But also what's so important is vitamin D helps T cells not overreact, because in some conditions where they get out of control and go overreacting, then we see autoimmune conditions. So vitamin D plays a very important function in regulating and modulating the T cell activity. So important to make sure those levels are adequate at that stage. Other areas that we see significant roles of vitamin C is in cancer. So there are randomized trials that suggest higher vitamin D status improves the survival rate in all kinds of cancers. So like, they can't say what exactly is happening, but the survival rates, you will live, and seems to indicate that you will live longer and survive better across specific cancer rates. In specific cancers, there's strongest evidence that vitamin D is protective for prostate cancer and for breast cancer. It's weaker in its association with colon cancer, but definitely there are tons and tons and tons of studies going on to see the effectiveness of vitamin D in the cancer rates. And heart disease, that's another major disease state in our country. Vitamin D is very important here in arterial flexibility and keeping arteries relaxed, which in turn helps control high blood pressure. But also, I've seen some work that reflected vitamin D helps protect the arteries from actually depositing plaque into the arteries, which would obviously talk about long-term health in heart and cardiovascular disease. Then we move on. There we go, to flus and colds. So, is vitamin D protective in flus and colds? And what we see there is that vitamin D actually has a protective factor that is, let me tell you what it does. It increases the secretion of antimicrobial peptides in the immune cells and the epithelial cells. So it actually helps fight infection in the lungs with colds and flus and influenza viruses. So that's an important understanding. And they've seen that influenza A seems to peak in the winter, and their studies looking at, is it correlated to lower levels of vitamin D in winter? So very important to see those T cells fighting in those microbial factors being able to be controlled and supporting colds and flu reduction or coping better and getting over them better with adequate vitamin D levels. So one of the things that influences all these is that they have discovered a nuclear vitamin D receptor. And that's not the nuclear atomic bomb, that is the nucleus inside the cell. And because that is where a lot of your control center in the cell is, where your genetic material is duplicated and replicated, a lot of the functions of the cell are controlled from that command center in the nucleus. For having a vitamin D receptor in the nucleus of the cell tells you that there are hundreds and thousands of processes that are going to be affected by having adequate levels or by having deficiency levels. We're going to see totally different outcomes because of this vitamin D being in the right quantity. So what they say, you see that premature death, that's a kind of scary statement, but combined analysis of multiple studies found that taking modest levels of vitamin B supplements associated statistically significantly with a 7% reduction in mortality from any cause. So we know that the immune system is supported, bone, muscle, cancer conditions, heart disease, infections, etc., all of them play a role in mortality, and you've got a better chance of living longer if you have adequate vitamin D levels. So hopefully that's given you some food for thought. So let's look a little bit now at if you don't have enough, what causes you not to have enough? Well, we talked about some of the lifestyle factors, but if we look now at the medications that could be interacting to reduce your vitamin D levels, and Dr. Zelda White talked about this in her talk, and it's anti-seizure medications, the glucocorticoids, which are all your cortisone treatments if they're long-standing, AIDS medication would make you more susceptible to deficiency, antifungal treatments. This is not rubbing a cream on your toenail, this is actually taking a systemic treatment, and these are the cholesterol binding products. So all of those drugs could affect your vitamin D levels. So let's look at different areas. So when we look at deficiencies, we see depression being higher with low vitamin D, schizophrenia is affected, circulatory systems, high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, we talked about that. Muscle aches and weakness, very important to keep our vitamin D levels there. Respiratory issues, very important in the current situation, and why our lung health is so critical and supporting respiratory wellness. The pancreas and type 1 diabetes, significant role of vitamin D in type 1 diabetes. I haven't gone into that very much, but just to know that it's important to have your levels adequate. And then obviously this massive area and body of research in osteoporosis. and bone health and uptake. So we see, and we talked about cancer, influenza, and tuberculosis, and vitamin D levels being exacerbated in deficiencies in these conditions. And then Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis is also affected by low vitamin D levels. So all of that making us aware that we need to make sure we're adequate. So if you're like me, truth be told, when they first started reporting low vitamin D levels, I thought, oh, this is a fad. And I didn't read much about it. This is years ago, 10 years ago. And I thought, and this was my thinking, we live in Africa where the sun shines most days of the year, all the day pretty much, and most days of the year. Would anybody in Africa ever be vitamin D deficient? So you don't have to put your hands up, but you could put your hands up on the call and just show me that you think like I thought. And this is research to show we were wrong. So it's a meta-analysis, and in science that means it's a very dependable, credible source, because it's a huge group of studies that have been looked at and they've come to a common conclusion. So out of 119 studies in 23 African countries, and this is published in 2020, and this is from Dr. Zelda White's material from the University of Pretoria that she presented. Approximately 1 in 5 people living in Africa has inadequate concentrations. Flippin' heck. Now that should get your attention. We do not, as much as we live in the Sunshine Continent, really have a grip on this. So we need to be aware that it is common to have low levels of vitamin D in South Africa and Southern Africa. So who needs what? So prem babies need lots. Why? Well, obviously, everything's happening fast in the little baby and they're growing. So they need, I'm going to talk about international units because it's easy to understand. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the measurements that we use, and they are so confusing. But prems need 800, up to a year need 400 international units. And then from 1 year to just about old age, 70. You're young at 60 and 50, that's not old, but every age category up to then, so I just lumped everybody together, is 600 international units per day that you would look to have as intake. So that would include pregnant and lactating people, ladies, not people, ladies. And then over 70, we need to up that intake. And I've got 800 because that's the official number. But I have to tell you, across the board in adults, I have seen literature pushing for that to be 1,000 international units a day. And I wouldn't be surprised in the future if we don't see that increase. So now, one of the things science does is they measure units, and they measure them in different countries differently just to make you feel dumb. So you look at them and you go, what is going on and what does that mean? And that's exactly what happens with vitamin D. It can be measured in all kinds of different units. So I just want to clarify, when you see this microgram, that is 40 international units, and 1 microgram is 1/1,000,000th of a gram and 1,000th of a milligram. So if you think about that, that is a tiny amount. And that is my point. You don't need to overdose on this. And there's a sweet spot that you need to get right. And it's abbreviated mcg or microgram. That is exactly the same thing. So when you're reading any literature, or when you are actually looking at labels, those are all the same thing. So let's look at how vitamin D actually works. And I haven't got a lot more to say. I just want to keep your attention as we go. But basically, you're going to get it from diet, and we're going to get better sources and less appropriate sources, and from sunlight. When we get those forms in the body, we can't use them. So off it trucks to the liver. And in the liver, it goes through a hydrolysing, it adds a hydrogen group, a hydroxyl group. And what you need to know there's a metabolic process it needs to go through, and it takes vitamin D to vitamin D2, as you see over here. But that is also not that usable, it's not usable in the body. So from the liver, off it goes to the kidney. And in the kidney, it's converted to D3, vitamin D3. And that is what we can use. And then that then creates an climate so that calcium can be absorbed in the gut, and then it builds obviously into the system so that the bone can take it up and build strong bones. So here's what I want to show you, is that if you have any disease states in the liver, then you're going to have vitamin D risk at being deficiency. Any disease states in the kidney, you're going to have vitamin D states that could be deficient and needs to be considered and measured and monitored, and as well as disease states in the digestive system and into the intestine. So there we see things like Crohn's disease, fat malabsorption, all of those things, and then you see the cholesterol binding drugs, all of those affecting this and having an effect in your vitamin D uptake. So it's not a simple nutrient, and it's pretty complex in all the different maneuvers it has to go through and organs it has to go through, and the critical sweet spot of that nutrient keeps us healthy and affects so many thousands of different physiological processes. So when should you take vitamin D? You should take it when you eat the most fat, because it's fat soluble, which generally is going to be your evening meal, and your fat metabolism is in a different zone in the evening, and Dr. Hines spoke beautifully about that. So taking vitamin D supplements with the biggest meal of the day that has the most fats and oils can increase your absorption by as much as 50%. Why I'm saying that is, please don't just take it on an empty stomach with a cup of coffee. That's not going to give you your ideal absorption. Where can you get it from? Well, this is a tricky thing. If we look at this top 10 vitamin D foods, you'll see up at the top here, you see all your fish sources. So cod liver oil, and then you've got sardines and mackerel and your salmon, all excellent sources. And then if you come down to things like eggs and milk and beef and things like that, they're lower in terms of sources. So surprisingly, mushrooms are a great source of vitamin D. But let's just look at that realistically. So 225 grams is a punnet of mushrooms. So for you to eat the whole punnet would give you 800, and remember we need 600 IU per day, so you get more than 800 international units. But who actually eats the whole punnet of mushrooms? Or do you eat a little bit of mushrooms, like a condiment on top of your steak or in a salad, but not the whole punnet? And look down at that size of salmon. So if you have a palm size of salmon, you'd be getting around 500 international units in your diet, which would be great. You need 600 a day plus sunlight. You'd be probably ticking the box. But who eats a palm-sized 100-gram thing of salmon every day? By the way, this is 100 grams giving you the international unit. So all of these foods would be 100 grams. And I just want to say, like, cod liver oil is an amazing source, but I'm not sure I would like to have liver pressed out of any fish, because liver is the cleanup factory of the body, and a lot of pesticides are going to be processed there. So we want to be able to get really great sources that are also safe for our body. I'm not saying all cod liver oil supplements are bad for you. I'm just saying liver isn't a great place to be getting a source of vitamin D. Okay, now in terms of calcium, calcium is a important nutrient. We know we need to absorb it. One of our good sources of calcium is milk. So if we look over here, this is something this is kind of nice to know. You don't have to know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Full cream milk, medium fat, low fat, fat free. Those are kind of the ranges of milk that we can get and the percentage of fats in them. No matter what the fat content is, whether it's full cream or fat free, the calcium content in milk is always the same. Okay, so that's something you do need to understand. Calcium is always the same no matter what you drink in terms of milks. But vitamin D is lower in the lower the fat milk content. So the full cream milk will have higher vitamin D than your fat-free milk will have. And in South Africa, only one company actually gives you vitamin D in a fortified form in milk. So in the US, when you talk about milk, it's a government regulation, and every cup of milk will give you 100 international units. In South Africa, that is not true. So when you look at literature on the internet or you use information from overseas, you need to understand only one company. And if you're on Discovery and you go onto their recommendations of food sources, etc., you'll be able to see what company and what products those are fortified in. That's not a punt for Discovery. It's just the only place I know that they actually state what it is without me telling you, which I shouldn't be doing on a forum like this. So your normal blood levels, this is nanomoles per liter. What we want to do, we want to structure 30 to 50 nanomoles, not structure, but that's what we want to be measuring our serum levels at. And then just to help understand, so once you've done your serum levels and you need to up your vitamin D, what you want to look at over here is raising your levels of vitamin D above 30, okay, so into the safe zone. And by the way, the literature is even saying moving this to 70 nanomoles per liter. So just moving this to higher than it is, but just to get it up over 30, if you're deficient, you'd need 1,500 to 2,000 international units per day for 6 weeks to supplement your diet to get that level up. So it takes a little bit of time to move up, and you need to keep consistently taking that intake to keep it there. So in children, it would be 1,000. So just to give you some information on how to increase your levels if you are deficient, or if you feel like you need to up your levels a little bit more. Okay, now in terms of supplementation, we don't want toxicity. Remember, fat stores in vitamin D stores fat. So too much can give toxic levels. So that's way the dietary intake, more than 4,000 international is the upper limit. So way beyond that is not what we want to be doing. Anorexia is seen, so loss of appetite. Doesn't mean you're going to have anorexia nervosa. It means that you have a loss of appetite at very high levels of vitamin D. Weight loss is seen at high vitamin D levels that are not great, not high. You know what I mean, over the limit levels that you shouldn't be getting. And this is not a weight loss strategy. This is going to mess up a lot of things besides losing weight, like irregular heartbeats, hardening of the blood vessels, tissues, decrease the blood serum levels of calcium, which means that they start pulling it out of the bone, and also damaging the heart and kidneys. So we don't want to have toxic levels of vitamin D. So let's look at supplements on the market. So our supplement is 600 international units a day. And why I'm positioning this is it's so safe. It's a really safe dosage. And you can take 500 international units a day. There's supplements that are made and formulated to that. And I've even seen 50,000 international units a day. This kind of a supplement would be given under medical supervision and only taken once a week. 5,000 international units would be given by medical practitioners to be able to help somebody up their vitamin D levels and monitoring it. So it's not something you would do routinely and stay on it. So if you're taking supplements that are 5,000 international units routinely right throughout, you may want to be checking your blood levels and see exactly where you are. This supplement is not high like that. It's 600. It is what we recommend as a daily intake, and it is a very safe level. You can take that for the rest of your life, never test your serum level intakes with normal diet and sunshine, and you will still be within that safe and tolerable zone. And I just wanted you to understand it's a great level that they've dosed this vitamin D supplement at. So with babies, just to show you that you actually build a vitamin D formula or script, you would look at what their diet is. Obviously, babies aren't going to be chewing, but I'm talking about food sources. So you've got your balanced food plate. Children in milks, breast milk will depend on the mother's intake at what that is. But you also need to make sure that if kids are on milks, that they get a fortified formula that has vitamin D in it. So we take diet, basically whatever they're eating, and then if they're taking one chewable multivitamin from NUTRILITE and one Kids Omega, they will be able to add up 100 and 160, and you can see that they need 400, so you can see where their supplement level needs to be added up. If they're taking 2 of these or 2 of these, you can work with that. By the way, on Kids Omega-3, it's also an awesome product for adults, because this is basically, you could change this thing that says Omega-3 and just put DHA supplement. It's a brilliant DHA supplement. That's what most of this product actually is. And adults can take that to improve memory. I take 2 a day, 500 milligrams DHA a day from the Kids Omega, because it's a very easy source to get a pure DHA source and supplement for memory. So adults can take this 100% as much as children can. And in children, it's critical because it's brain development, and even more so than the EPA that is needed in growing kids. Okay, so for adults, we would take our diet. We're aiming at 600 international units. We in daily would get 100 international units. In XX, you would get 200. In CalMag-D, which is, I mean, amazing because it's vitamin D and magnesium and calcium for perfect absorption and bone strength. So you're getting 132, and in the vitamin D, you're getting 600. So you build whatever your particular need is in moving forward, along with sunshine and along with your diet. And then in older folks, it's exactly the same, but remember, we're taking it at 800. We want to increase that. And many, many, many older people are at risk of low vitamin D in the current status of where we find ourselves in the world. We know that it's super important to support the immune system, and in older folks, just make sure that the vitamin D is adequate to support their immune system. So very important to keep continuing there. So the vitamin D is a great supplement. I have it here on my desk. I love this tablet because it's little. I'm just going to show you. It's a tiny little supplement. Can you actually see that? It's little, super easy to swallow. If you struggle to swallow anything, start taking your products with yogurt. It'll help you swallow with the viscosity of the yogurt, and you'll learn to swallow. I taught our 4-year-old to swallow omega-3 just by giving it to her with the yogurt, and then she started swallowing all kinds of other things. So fabulous. But taking your vitamin D supplements, easy to swallow. It gives you 600 international units. And here's the thing, that this is actually made from 2 different sources. So from a cultured yeast extract, which is UV light has been used on. And so that's a natural source, and another natural source of lanolin. And it brings together 2 natural sources that give you vitamin D2 and D3. So the body knows what to do with D2, and it can instantly use that D3. And it's a really clean, beautiful, easy to use product in a very, very safe dose.
The sun provides energy for things to grow and flourish. The sun is the source of all life. Exposing our skin to the sun helps our bodies to produce vitamin D, which contributes to overall health. For many people, a lack of vitamin D is becoming a reality. Spending a lot of time indoors, weaker and shorter sunlight during autumn and winter, the challenge to get enough vitamin D from diet alone. All this might result in vitamin D inadequacy. So what can you do if you can't get enough sun? Reach for NUTRILITE Vitamin D and benefit from the full potential of this sun vitamin. NUTRILITE vitamin D is derived from natural sources. It contains yeast, a high concentrated source of vitamin D. NUTRILITE vitamin D supports your overall health. Vitamin D contributes to the health of bones and teeth. It maintains normal muscle function and supports the immune system. Put the power of the sun in the palm of your hand with NUTRILITE vitamin D.
So that's a summary of everything, and as I said, it's a really easy tablet to use, and I think kids could easily get a tablet like that down. So you could use it as a supplement if necessary in diets that are indicated. And it's great because there's 90 tablets in that little bottle. So it really is a concentrated package of vitamin D and sunshine in a bottle for us to be able to use. And I definitely make sure I have it. I have my parents connected to, just started taking it, and it's only just come to South Africa, and I have to say it is long overdue that we had a supplement like this to really support our full and total metabolic processes, as it's absolutely evident that it is commonly missing and deficient in the South African diet. So I don't have a lot more to say other than that I love the NUTRILITE brand. It is a privilege to be associated with it because it's food-based and their high ethics of how they connect their nature research and their scientific research and the collaboration between the two. It's just a superb opportunity to support health from a nutrient supplement that comes from food, and it's why I am so comfortable with this range, and I hope that you will put this on your shopping list and get out in the sun and take care of yourselves. Thank you very much.
Life is busy. Our days are filled with fast-paced schedules and quick fixes. But to get the best out of life, NUTRILITE is building a pure, powerful connection to nature. As the pioneers of plant-based phytonutrients, with over 80 years of innovation in nutritional science, we search the globe for the finest nutrient-rich botanicals, then grow many of them on our own sustainable farms. Through unique farming methods, preserving the potency of each precious nutrient, controlling every process from seed to finished supplement. Our ongoing scientific innovations will bring more phytonutrient color to our diets. And because of you, NUTRILITE is now the world's #1 selling brand of vitamins and dietary supplements. By connecting to better nutrition naturally, we can continue to do what's best, not just for ourselves, but also to inspire others to achieve optimal well-being. NUTRILITE, in harmony with nature and yourself.
This was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Ruth, for such empowering, insightful training and your time in making this possible. I think I did mention in the beginning to everyone that we're going to open up the next slide, so that we can get your questions. So you'll see, as and when I move to the next slide, I would need you. This is now the right opportunity, the right time for you to go into the Q&A section and ask us those questions, and we'll be able to deal with them. We've got the next 10 minutes, which on average will give us about, say, 5 questions to answer. And should we not get to answering your questions, please remember, like I said, you've got the email address at the bottom, which is nutrilite.program@my.com. Send us those questions and we'll be able to answer. To me, I think this was very insightful. It was full of sunshine, and there's so many things that were eye-opening. And I think if you feel the same way, or if you got anything that you need clarity on, we're gonna go to the Q&A session. And see, let me just see if there's any questions around. Let me just see, 1 second. Okay, geez, guys, there's only 2 questions. There's only 2 questions. Let's do the questions now. Let's do the Q&As now. Let's do the questions now. Okay, I'm just still waiting for those questions. Okay, I've got the first question. Somebody's asking, is it recommended to give the vitamin D supplement to children at 6 years plus? Dr. Ruth, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but I'll answer it from a brand perspective as well. Okay, I think she missed me there. Your mic is off.
I'm here. I actually was turning around and asking the pediatrician sitting behind me. So I was asking for a medical panelist who's not officially paneling with me. But if you're trying to get 600 international units from the supplement and the kids need to take 800, there's no reason why they couldn't take the supplement if they if their diet doesn't have any other fortification sources like milks, etc.
Yeah, so
I can't see why they wouldn't.
Yeah, that is excellent feedback.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike said that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also want to remind people as well that if you remember that slide that you were on where it showed the Kizzy's multivitamin and also the omega, we need not forget that all those are components of what contains the vitamin D. Yes, and we've just got, let's say, professional feedback from a doctor to say, listen, yes, it is fine to include that in. So we need not forget that it does not now mean that, oh, because there's vitamin D here, then we must forget all the other ones. So basically, everything forms part of a whole balanced approach to diet, and that is what I want everyone to remember as well, over and above that feedback. I think I'm gonna do exactly. Somebody's saying I'm on XX currently and notice it contains 200 international units already. Is there a problem adding the vitamin D since the total will be 800? I think this is an excellent question. I don't know. Let me take that on. Let me just take that and I'll share it with Dr. Ruth. So basically, everybody, if you remember when Dr. Ruth was speaking, she did mention that we need to be, let's say, targeting, let's say, on at least 1,000 international units per day. So when you look at, say, if I were to sit and say, and also the upper safety limits is, let's say, when I go, let's say, over 4,000 units. So what we're recommending on a daily basis, if I were to say myself, if I were to take, let's say, the daily, and I do the vitamin D, and I do maybe the CalMag D, that will still not get me to exceed that safety net that we spoke about. So if you're taking a multivitamin either in the form of a XX or the daily, and doing the CalMag D with the vitamin D, everything is still kosher and within the limits. So we need not worry much about that. As long as we're not gonna be exceeding that upper safety limit that we did mention. So is there any feedback from you, Dr. Ruth, as well? If you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that you build the vitamin D dose, that it comes from different sources like sunlight, like diet, and then supplementation is a supplement. It's a top up to what your average intake is, and it may be seasonal. You may find in winter that it's more necessary to do top up and supplement than it is in other times, or when you're particularly at risk of colds and flu and other infections. So those may not always be consistent. So I think it's a holistic approach and understanding of what you're doing specifically. And on a platform like this, it's very hard to just give information about specific situations. And that's Simon, I can see a whole bunch of questions that are coming up on the chat, not on the Q&A, about whether people can take this in very difficult situations like stem cells and possibly having latent TB and different areas. I just think that this is a platform, it's very difficult to give specific advice and dosage, and I would be careful about that. But I would definitely, now that you understand the value of vitamin D, is to encourage people who have some of these conditions that are particularly affected by vitamin D to speak to their healthcare providers about whether they have, whether they need adequate supplementation, if their serum levels are adequate or not. That would definitely be a conversation.
Yeah, I think also we also need to remember that with every NUTRILITE supplement, and MWA's always has said this in the beginning, should any one of us have a pre-existing medical condition, like some of the things that you've mentioned there, those are pre-existing medical conditions. If I feel that, listen, I've got a particular, a condition that I'm dealing with, it is always safe to, deal with your responsible medical practitioner who's helping you manage that condition, to say, listen, this, I've learned, I'll give an example, I've learned about vitamin D, and I believe that, no, this is what, impact it can have in my life. Is it safe based on all the other things or the treatment that I'm on with you? Can I include, how can I incorporate this into the whole plan that we have? And I think that is a first port of call, and that is, how we must always approach it. So we cannot end up sort of like, self-medicating or taking, deviating from the protocol that would have been, given to us, and sort of like doing that autonomously. So we need to be consulting with those responsible, practitioners, like I said. Okay, let me just go into the chats, man, then, because I had hoped that all the questions would be coming, on the
question on the chat that that has come up, and I wanted to mention, so thank you for asking it, Cheryl, was just body weight making a difference.
Yeah.
I think if you look at BMI, just if you're in your normal healthy BMI, the standard recommendations do apply. But once you go over 30 and you start seeing that you're heavier than you need to be, your vitamin D requirements will also increase because of more fat storing it and holding it. So I think, not to give you specifics, but to be aware that your need would be greater the heavier you are.
Yeah, I think that is quite excellent, and that is true. Another question that just come up, somebody's asking, can one only obtain your current vitamin D levels in a blood test? Yes, that's absolutely. That's how you determine your serum levels of vitamin D, if at all, there's interest in that. There's no other way that we can, we cannot do a mathematical calculation. It's like somebody saying, how much red blood cells have I got? You need to go and do an analysis in a lab, through a medical practitioner that will be able to determine, where your actual levels are. Then from the, that is the only way to find, that out.
Simon, there's another question on the chat. Can someone in cold weather country, how much can they take? So the vitamin D status and the recommendations to take is for everybody living wherever they are. So your serum levels will tell you if you're deficient, and then you take it up to the levels that you should have it at. And the intake is a universal. It's not for hot or cold weather. It's going to be the supplement needed to bring you into the right serum levels. So if you live in a cold area or you have a very indoor-based lifestyle and you live in South Africa, you will still need to supplement according to your serum needs, serum level, and the needs indicated by that.
Yeah, I think one last question, given the time that we have, was that somebody's asking, they are alluding to a particular medical condition, to say that is it still safe for them? Can vitamin D be taken? I'll give an example with the TB or any other, those conditions. I think there was a slide where we did identify the people that are at risk, of vitamin D deficiency. So if at any stage, regardless of, let's say, the condition that you're having, you fall under that a particular group of people that are at risk of deficiency, then yes, that is an indication for us to start, supplementing to bridge those nutritional gaps. And also, I'll give an example. Not only people with medical condition, but if I feel in my diet, you refer to, somebody, having to have mushrooms, or somebody having to have, let's say, a salmon. If I'm not having salmon on a daily basis for me to be able to take in vitamin D through, if I'm not doing that, I'm one of those people that are also at risk of, running having a deficiency. If I'm one person that is always, let's say, in the office, in the morning, or like now we've been, under lockdown, we're not being able to go out in the sun most of the time. Yes, I'm one of those people that require that. So all of us, if I'm sitting in my car, some of us are now, driving our cars, because now the regulations have been sort of like, been dimmed down a bit, relaxed a bit. We're in our cars with tinted windows. I'm one of those people that I'm encapsulated in the car the whole day. The sun rays are not getting to me. Yes, I'm one of those people. So those people are falling under a group of us that could be running a risk of vitamin D deficiency. And who are those people? It's mainly all of us. So, but now with just different conditions. So with that, I just want to express my gratitude to Dr. Ruth and